President Biden just delivered his second State of the Union address. It had the usual surface-level appeals to bipartisanship and plenty of uncontroversial content. But, like any State of the Union, it also had its fair share of partisan whoppers and misleading spin. Here are the 4 most misleading claims Biden made in his big speech.
I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs. More jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years.
First things first, Biden and Congress, who he's speaking to, did not create those jobs. The private sector did. Businesses and Americans did. What's more, most of those jobs are simply jobs returning from before the pandemic. 26 months later, we've now finally just recovered our pre-pandemic job level. So the president is taking credit for creating a bunch of jobs that are just returning from before. And yes, the unemployment is low, and that's good news. But again, it's just returning to about what it was before the pandemic. Meanwhile, the labor force participation rate is much lower still than it was before the pandemic, which means there's still millions of people sitting out on the sidelines. In fact, if the labor participation rate had fully recovered from before the pandemic, at least 2.6 million more people would be working right now. Meanwhile, real wages are down under President Biden significantly after you account for inflation, which is still out of control. So while there is some good economic news, President Biden's rosy spin is pretty misleading.
And 2 years ago, COVID had shut down, our businesses were closed, our schools were robbed of so much, and today, COVID no longer controls our lives.
First, COVID did not close our schools and our businesses. The government did. And while it's true that to some degree COVID no longer controls our lives, thank goodness, that is despite President Biden's best efforts, not because of them. He has continued the federal emergency declaration long past when it should have ended. And he fought to keep in place federal vaccine mandates and federal air travel mask mandates. All of those things only went away because he lost in court. So for Biden to try to take credit for COVID no longer controlling our lives is, a little ironic. Oh, and don't forget that President Biden promised as a candidate that if he got elected, he would shut down the coronavirus. But now more Americans have died from COVID under President Biden's watch than did before. So much for, shutting it down.
My administration has cut the deficit by more than $1.7 trillion. The largest deficit reduction in American history.
Okay, this one really needs a reality check. The decrease in the deficit is only compared to 2020, which was, due to the COVID emergency, the highest deficit ever. Biden still went on to run the second highest ever deficit in 2021. Congrats? Yeah, that's the drop he's taking credit for. And this drop only occurred because COVID emergency spending expired. Not because of Biden. In fact, it would have dropped much more without Biden's policies. You don't have to take my word for it. Even CNN and the Washington Post have fact-checked the president and pointed this out. In reality, President Biden's policies have added more than $4.8 trillion to the deficit over the next decade. So his claim about reducing the deficit is, as the president loves to say, malarkey.
Ban assault weapons now. Ban them now. Once and for all. I led the fight to do that in 1994. And in 10 years, that ban was law and mass shootings went down. After we let it expire in the Republican administration, mass shootings tripled. Let's finish the job and ban these assault weapons.
Here, President Biden renewed his push to ban assault weapons, a made-up and arbitrary designation. And he claimed that doing so reduced mass shootings in the past. First, we should point out some context. Assault weapons are not driving America's murder problem. In fact, only about 3% of homicides involve rifles of any kind. What's more, almost all research has found, and most experts agree, that the 1994 to 2004 ban on assault weapons did not reduce mass shootings. Just ask researchers from Northeastern University who studied it and concluded that the ban had virtually no impact. And that study's not an outlier. The RAND Corporation did a review of all the available studies and found 0 qualifying studies showing that the assault weapons ban reduced mass shootings. Even the liberal outlet Vox admitted that there's not statistical evidence supporting this ban. So again, more malarkey. All in all, it was a pretty typical State of the Union address. Honestly, it wasn't as divisive and dark as I expected it to be. There was lots of partisan fan service, some appeals to bipartisanship that are mostly surface level, and of course, a whole bunch of misleading claims, far more than the ones I can identify in just one video. But I hope you found this helpful and that now you know the difference between the truth and the fiction that he was selling up there. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, consider subscribing, yada yada yada, and I'll see you all in my next video.